Well, hello, Kris. Thank you for coming with us today. You're up in Oregon, right?
Absolutely for having me.
Now, I understand that your father was an intelligence agent and you had no idea about it. And when you were a young man, he took you into a room and there was a professor from a university and he started telling you some things. Can you kind of?
Well, we kind of knew about it in that uh, uh, my older brother and my older sister and I would talk because we'd lived overseas and we'd done a lot of traveling that other people hadn't done, and I always figured that my brother learned it at Fairfax High School.
Okay.
And because we would talk about it as kids, but as far as a family, it wasn't spoke about. My dad had never mentioned it. My mother had never mentioned it. It wasn't talked about around the dining room table.
And this was in the 60s and he took you aside and you thought you were having the sex talk or the plot talk?
Right, the drug talk, because he hadn't given me the other one. I was already married and had a 6-month old kid. And yeah,
What did he tell
basically,
you?
well, he looked at me with Professor D.F. Fleming, and he said, the Vietnam War is all about drugs. So I'm thinking he's talking about the mafia. And then he says, and communism's all a sham. These same secret societies are behind it all. It's all a big game. And at that point in time, my dad lost me. I thought he was nuts, you know. And that's when the light bulb came on about, okay, he's having the drug talk with me.
And he
And,
told you that they were out to opiate your generation?
right. He had told me that, maybe a year or so before. He had told me that out in the driveway when I came home one day from college.
And he was doing
And
psychological operations?
he started working in psychological warfare while working with G2 in World War II.
Okay, so that started you on your quest. You want to find out what was your dad talking about? Secret societies, and you've actually published the real history of the Bilderberg Club, which is an underground bestseller, and we're going to get to that in a minute. But talk to us about the quest. How did you start getting into conspiracy research? What were some of the things you learned in those early days?
Well, my dad kept on talking, and he told me all about his career, and then he told me this. They were playing out a lose scenario in Vietnam, and that didn't make any sense. And so I just kind of went on with my life, and says, okay, well, my dad had to talk with me, and then I was reading in the early 70s. I was reading I believe it was a Gallery magazine, and uh, just for the articles, of course. And because there started to have articles in there about the subject I call CIA drugs, which had talked about, and then also the Kennedy assassination.
And
And in one of the
CIA drug dealing, that's a huge issue. That's something that I talk about a lot, is we think that we're the good guys and we're really not. Have been involved in narco trafficking for a long time. But go on, Kennedy
oh
assassination.
yeah, and so I'm reading this article, and in there is they say, well, there's people that say the CIA did it, people say the mob did it, people say the Cubans did it, Castro did it, and then there was like a throwaway line, and it said, and like some people talk about the involvement of secret societies, and that really brought back that conversation that I'd had with my dad, because I hadn't really thought about it, because it was he lost me. It didn't compute, and so
I actually consider you to be one of the foremost Kennedy assassination researchers because of your book that you published about the girlfriend of Lee Harvey Oswald.
me and Lee, well, thank you. I mean, it's just it's something that happened, and we want to find out what's going on.
And you actually
And
threw a birthday party for Lee Harvey Oswald a few years ago in New Orleans.
we've been doing that every year since. Well, Judith Very Baker, we published her book. Spent quite a couple years getting it together and researching it. Yeah, me and Lee, and she was living in Europe because she had gotten so many death threats and been in the hospital, and the harassment had gotten to the point where it was affecting family and friends. And she didn't want anything bad to happen to people, so she moved over to Europe. And she wouldn't, most of my authors, they want to meet the people and sign a book, Well, she didn't want to do that, and I couldn't talk her into it. She wouldn't do it. And finally,
what were some of the revelations that Judy Mary Baker gave that could show that Lee Harvey Oswald was actually an intelligence agent?
well, in conversations she had with him, and then with the actions that she had with him, both her and Lee Harvey Oswald started the same day at Standard Coffee. A week before, they both started the same at Riley Coffee, which were basically cover jobs. I mean, they were there working on both were part of a secret project that was using. I mean, it's a wild story.
Well, Dr. Mary
Using cancer.
Yeah,
using cancer to try and kill Castro. But you get these secret projects, and you get a doctor, and you put him, in with his toys, and he's playing with his toys. But then you've got the operatives. They're out in the lobby. They're bored to deck. They're playing canasta, and so they come up with other things that what the scientist, is doing can be used for.
and we want to get to the role that Lee Harvey Oswald plays in the book Dr. Mary's Monkey. But just going back to your own personal growth and stuff, you would go to these bookstores,
Yeah.
and people started telling you that you were a conspiracy theorist. So you were like, okay, fine, and you go to these bookstores and you would ask, do you have any books on conspiracy theories?
Yeah, I took it on as a intellectual discipline, and I'd go into all the stores and ask them for their conspiracy books, and there would all of them had at least one. And so I started reading these, and these are what are commonly known as screeds, because I can find you a book that blames everything on the Jews. I can find you a book that blames everything on the Masons, a book that blames everything on the Quakers, a book that blames everything on the Mormons, a book that blames everything on the hippies, whatever you want. So I decided that and how I research is I take a book and I look at its table, its bibliography, go to those books, and then look at its bibliography, and then go to those books, and pretty soon you're away from the screeds and you're in dusty tomes about banking and drugs and different things. The hardest things I found to find information about was the secret societies.
And we want to talk about that. The main secret society being, of course, the Bilderberg Group. And that book kind of put your publishing house on the map. It's written by Daniel Estulin. Talk to us about that and that huge success worldwide that you've had with that book.
Well, there were some books that we did before Daniel's. Daniel had an agent because, True Story of the Bilderberg had sold over 1 million copies in Spain, which is very unusual for a nonfiction book in Spain to sell that many. And so he had access to everybody. It was already in most of the major European countries and in a bunch of different languages. And his agent was the agent for Dean Koontz and for a bunch of Nobel Prize winners. and he had access to everybody in New York. Nobody in New York would touch it. And finally, Daniel called me because of a book that we had published because of Wayne Madsen,
Sure.
Jaded Task. And part of what was going on was Daniel had a contract that the agent had got to him for because this book was a big, huge success in Europe. Okay, I mean they've sold way more in Europe than we've sold in the United States.
And, and I also want to say in the third world where you have pirate
in Spanish,
where they just photocopy books and then sell them on the street, you see that book also. I don't
right?
recommend anybody buy a pirated book, but in South America where I live, it's very well known.
Right. But so he had a contract to build for a $20 million movie based on the true story of the Bilderbergs. And to get that contract valid, he needed an English publisher. So it was, there was reasons for him calling me too there.
What happened to that contract though? There wasn't any movie.
Well, we brought Daniel over a couple times to speak, and one of the times we brought him to LA, and we were there, and he says, hey, I want you to come meet these people. So I went with him. We went to Four Seasons there in Beverly Hills, and we met these people owned the Terminator franchise. Okay. They were about ready to come out with Terminator 4, and they were on plans. They said after that, the next movie we're going to be making is Daniel's. And I said, you might have some political problems. And they said, they weren't worried about that. They said as soon as the Terminator was out and everything, and the video game, they'd have so much money in their bucket that it wouldn't make any difference. And I said, okay, and let them buy the $30 salad. But
yeah, tell us, who are the Bilderberg Club? Just give us a rundown on that.
Well, the Bilderberg Group is a group that was started in 1950. Prince Bernard and a couple other people, and it consists of the heads of the largest companies in the world, plus the royals, plus a lot of heads of government, mostly in the West.
Newspaper editors that then practice self-censorship.
I'm sorry, I didn't understand that.
And high-level media people that then self-censorship and claim it doesn't exist.
Right. And so these folks did go ahead because they had a signed contract, and they announced in Madrid at the premiere of Terminator 4, a $26 million blockbuster movie based on the true story of the Bilderberg Group. Well, what happened was in less than 6 months, that company was bankrupt and the contract was voided. Okay, so they did not have to produce the movie. And when I talked to people in Hollywood, they all said, gosh, we really don't know what happened. They still have their money, So, and we had other opportunities there in Hollywood. We had people that wanted to make a terrible mistake by the late great Hank Albarelli, and also Franklin scandal, and they were working very hard on it. We had meetings with Academy Award winning directors and everything.
Yeah. We got a lot to cover, but talk to us about CIA drug dealing, because that's been something that you've published a lot about, as well as CIA terrorism.
CIA drug dealing is basically a cover for the secret societal drug dealing. And, you get a little bit of rogueness out of it now and then.
Could you say, is it fair to say though that the Bush crime family and the Clinton crime family came to power on a wave of cocaine profits?
Well, the Clintons are lieutenants in the Bush crime family, okay, and they were never going to get any higher, okay. Now, talking about drug dealing, what's the how, well, let's just start with a little number. Okay, in the United States, they say there's 1 million to 1.2 million junkies. Okay, that's less than 1% of the population. I think there's quite a few more. Okay, but add 1 million to 1.2 million, that's a ton a day. 1 ton a day, every day, that needs to be broken down and gotten to every junkie. Okay, and how does all that get into the United States? Okay, what do you think the largest import vehicle of drugs is mostly cocaine and heroin and opium into the United States is?
You tell me. Airplanes?
Pipelines.
Pipelines.
International pipelines. Okay, oil pipelines. Okay, I mean, how does a pipeline work? I mean, you just open up one end and stuff in it and it comes out the other end? You know, I mean, and if you, let's say you're delivering oil to one customer and then you're delivering oil to another customer, well, you must be able to, you know, keep those oils differently. And you got pigs, these things that go in between them and clean the pipes and stuff like this. But, you know, I had these people from Mexico talk to me one day, and they were telling me how, you see, there's these valleys in Mexico that have been growing poppies for hundreds of years, over 100 years, okay? And they said all of a sudden, this pipeline company came to them and said, hey, you know, we got this pipeline coming up from South America, okay? And we'd like to put one, have it come up in your valley here. Because, see, I mean, you look at, you know, Brazil's got, it's a pretty big place, isn't it?
Oh, yeah.
You know, I mean, do you think you could clandestinely grow opium poppies in Brazil? and who owns large tracts of land in Brazil?
Who?
Oh, the Rockefellers, the Bushes, you know.
Have you ever been sued by the covert operations, or threatened, or taken to court, or anything like that?
Yeah, by Special Forces Association, and we beat them.
Can you talk about that?
Sure. It was our second book that we published at Trine Day, called Expendable Elite. It was written by a lieutenant colonel, and the only lieutenant colonel that I know that didn't graduate from high school, okay, because he was an assassin, among other things. And he had this quote unquote sexy little story about a relationship to the JFK assassination. And when he contacted me, I thought that's what he was wanting to do. But no, he wanted to tell his story of Vietnam. And because my father had been in country in Vietnam in '56, and I had been trying to learn about my dad and things and study what he sent me, I'd done a bunch of research about it. So I knew about this guy's story and about the Wahows and stuff. And I said, sure. And
the Wahows?
Wahows, they're a militant Buddhist sect, okay? And they controlled the river. And there's certain times in the year in Vietnam that the only way you get around is through the river. And they came and see, at that point in time, they were trying to keep up the fiction that we don't kill anybody. United States didn't kill anybody, okay? They've since changed that fiction, okay? And we know that now the president has a list in his top drawer of even Americans on there that, you know, were authorized to kill, okay? And so they were trying to fight the fiction that we didn't assassinate anybody and just, you know, try and control the news. They'd done it before. They'd shut down a CNN story.
Talk to us about this concept of the deep state, or also known as the dual state, and how that functions over many administrations and Operation Lock.
Well, I'm not a big fan of deep state. The term deep state. Deep state comes from Turkey, okay, and it is. It's the same. You could call it the bureaucracy if you wanted to a certain extent. But in the United States, yeah, the bureaucracy's got a little bit of power, but the power resides in the secret societies. It is not, and the secret societies then use the state and the other arms, their media arms and that. But it is
okay. So I think you might have something there. Let's talk about the media and Operation Mockingbird and how they have intelligence agents in all the major news organizations.
Well, they do, but again, to control an organization, yeah, you don't have to have everybody on board. Okay, it's about gaming. I mean, I'm 70 years old. Okay, my daddy told me stuff he told me at 20. Okay, and so I've had a lot of time to think about this, to go to look behind the curtain and all of this. And one thing I try and tell people is don't get too cynical and don't jump too far. Because one thing about conspiracy theory is fraught with danger, okay? Because there's all kinds of people out there with all kinds of agendas that will use conspiracy theory to hook you in, okay? And it really boils down to a secret societal system, and they game people. They don't have to have somebody completely on board. It's good if they have them blackmailed or something like that. But again, they play to the rules of intelligence a lot, in where, okay, if I'm an intelligence officer and I want A to go over to B, okay, I'm not gonna tell A why I want him to go to B. If I can get A to go to B and he doesn't even know I exist, that's the best scenario.
Well,
Okay.
like false flag terrorism, September 11th. That's
Oh yeah. But like people say, well, like George W. Bush. You don't tell George W. Bush. You let him be a puppet and react and do all his stupid things. Okay. And like the Kennedy assassination, people like to bring a lot of people in, but there was a naval intelligence and CIA were shadowing Hoover, okay, because naval intelligence was given an aegis, okay, in the 20s, and some say before, because there was weird stuff going on in our body politic. Okay, the secret societies were affecting our body politic. Okay, and so they were told to go off reservation and look in, and so there were some of these folks that were tracking Hoover, and they got on tape about the Kennedy assassination. They got Johnson and Hoover. Okay, from the secret societal standpoint, those guys are so blackmailable, they're in your pocket. Okay, you can make them do whatever you want. Then you had Alan Dulles, who's your consigliere, who's heavily involved, and then you had George H.W. Bush and Nelson Rockefeller, and that was your crew in the Kennedy assassination. And that's your I mean, you look at the Bilderberg. I mean, who's the guy who was always showing up? David Rockefeller. Okay,
well,
I mean,
yeah, and just a few years ago, well, I say a few years ago, probably now more like 10, 12, 14 years ago, there was a confession from the son of E. Howard Hunt, who at the time was living in my hometown of Eureka, California. He goes on national radio and says, oh yeah, we got the cassette tapes of my father confessing to being involved with the Kennedy assassination. Nobody even cares. Nobody even knows it
Eh,
happened.
It made it into Rolling Stone.
Oh yeah,
Okay,
that it did. That it did.
it made a story into Rolling Stone. But again, those folks will only go so far. I mean, I know St. John Hutt. I met him down there in Northern California. I'm a musician, play up in Oregon. We always go down to California, want to make any money, and I told St. John, I says, listen, you're E. Howard Hunt's kid. Your book should be coming from out New York. And he hired an agent. They tried and didn't happen. So we had to publish it. Okay.
One of the favorite books that I have is Dr. Mary's Monkey,
Mm-hmm.
and covers the vaccine issue a lot. It was written from the perspective of, again, a son of somebody who worked in the project. Talk to us about Dr. Mary's Monkey, how there's a connection with Lee Harvey Oswald. What's the basic premise of this book?
Well, after we got going, I got a call from Ed Haslam, and he was the son of an orthopedic surgeon there and a professor in New Orleans. And he had self-published it. And he said, hey, you want to? And I said, sure. And so we took his Mary, Fairy, and the Monkey virus and turned it into Dr. Mary's Monkey. And it's an amazing book. He tells a story that he heard, because if you've ever been to New Orleans is a fabulous town. As the people there say, it's the largest small town on the planet, because everybody knows something about everybody else's business. And it tells the story of well, you have to go back to penicillin, okay? Because basically, when we started giving people a lot of penicillin, we all of a sudden had a polio vaccine, because the penicillin, and the guy who invented it talks about it, the penicillin kills the flora and fauna in the gut. And because the polio virus is with us all the time, but generally when the gut's full of the flora and the fauna, the penicillin just goes right through. I mean, the polio virus goes right through us. Well, so we had a polio epidemic. They came up with these vaccines. They made the vaccines rather fast. One of the things they used with the vaccine, they made it on green monkey kidneys. And when these they were host to these very virulent viruses. And it wasn't, they didn't do it on purpose. It was because they were using a ceramic filter, and these viruses, to go through the filter, they were normally these big balls, but they would become snakes and go through the filter. And so they ended up with the polio vaccine being contaminated with cancer-causing monkey viruses.
But there were also, in the book, it talks a lot about biowarfare and experiments with diseases.
It became at the level of the Manhattan Project toward bioweapon, because you had this very smart girl whose grandmother died of cancer, and when she was 12, and made a vow that she was going to cure cancer. And so she, at her high school in Florida, on dirt floor underneath the bleachers, was giving mice cancer faster than the big boys in their big fancy labs. And she came to the attention of Dr. Oshner, Nobel Prize winners, and got involved in this project. And when he first wrote Dr. Mary Monkey, he didn't know about her, but he knew there had to be somebody like her. And then actually, they sent a false Judith Ferry Baker to him to kind of find out what he knew.
Is Judy Mary Baker, that's the girlfriend, the former girlfriend of Oswald, right?
Right. Right.
I've got a question for you, and then I want to move on to kind of what's happening on the political scene these days. But one of the issues that really concerned me, and one of the reasons I left the United States, was this issue of weather manipulation and the overhead spraying. And you could see them spraying in areas that were only cleared for military flights, like rural areas like Eureka. They spray all day. They have a fake cloud cover. Is geoengineering, is that, are the decisions for that, like where it gets sprayed, how the weather's controlled, is that coming from the secret societies, or is that coming from naval intelligence?
Well, as of right now, you know, as much as I know about it, there's a very good, actually, it's Shasta County, the Shasta County Commission did a great study on the chemtrails, or whatever you want to call them. And the full thing is several hours long.
Oh
I
yeah,
strongly recommend.
I know Dane Wigington. I've had contact with him over the years since I'm also
Right,
in Northern California.
and you know, generally, if you track, you know, the stuff down, what you find is barium, right? You find barium and aluminum, and to my understanding, what's going on is it's mostly a military application, okay, and I'm sure it has something to do with weather modification too.
Now,
But
is Trump not aware of this, or is he just so
Trump's a
in the?
stooge. Trump's a stooge. Trump is just a stooge. The end game of the secret societies is to rule the world through China. Okay. To do that, they have to destroy America and its standing in the world. Okay, which I mean, you live in South America, and you know, China has a large presence there. Okay, they don't talk about here, but get back to your chemtrail thing, and one thing that's going on, see, they make arrays up in the sky so they can bounce radio signals off of each other, so they can talk to the subs on the other side of the world, and blah blah blah. Okay, but one thing that's happening is they are atomizing this aluminum, and once it comes out of the sky, it gets into the it comes up to the tree roots and gets into the trees. So that's one reason why we're having such wildfires, is the trees have aluminum in it, which burns very, very hot. Okay.
Do you think there's anything to these claims that these wildfires are caused by directed energy weapons?
Uh, there, there could be the capability is there. Okay. Uh, uh, and the other thing is, they've been playing a lot with just exciting the atmosphere, okay, through harp and you know, making different vibrations to do things, and they've been you know, toying with this stuff for quite a while.
It's interesting to me. I had my big political awakening around the time of the Iraq War, and that's when I started reading books about September 11th and finding out how it was the inside job. It's interesting to me that the anti-war movement, if you will, the peace movement, so to speak, they've been now, they're the hawks, and these are the people that are opposing Trump, even though a lot of Trump's positions that he campaigned for
Well,
are populist.
again, going back to my dad's comment, he says they're out to opiate your whole generation. Okay, my generation, the boomer generation, was not supposed to cohere. We were not supposed to come together. We were supposed to be a pieced out, drugged out generation. Okay, both of
Well,
those,
and I
both
think
of those, the peace and the drug were being used as control mechanisms. Okay,
you know, I think what you're saying is so true, because I remember my grandparents, their generation, they were very together. They would go to the Rotary Club. They were very social. But my parents' generation, they live in their little houses with their little boxes.
yeah, no, it was a but you see, we did come together, but what we came together, the thing that came together was hippies. We came together as hippies around a joint being smoked around a circle. Okay. And what came out of the hippies is the personal computer and the internet. Okay. And that's where the change is being based from. Okay. There's a great book called Generations, A History of America's Future. Okay. And that is the dynamic, because see, the personal computer allows me, myself, to be a publisher, and the internet allows me to tell people about them. The personal computer allows you to be a media person. Okay. And what we have is a whole new media that is being created. Okay. Because, I mean, the personal computer has done an amazing amount of things. For one thing, it's made people sit at a typewriter and create and communicate. Okay. And so I'm very, very, very hopeful for the future.
Well, just in the last year, the issue of censorship has come out in full swing because of the
censorship has come on Facebook.
Yeah,
okay, I mean,
YouTube,
there's been censorship on Google almost since after the first couple years. I mean, it used to be my story on George W. Bush was number one on Google.
What was your story? What was your story on George W. Bush?
It was about him and his membership in Skull and Bones. Okay, and then one day, all of a sudden, it was gone. And so it's the censorship has been, but there's a lot of things that will happen and things that have to happen. But I'm just very very hopeful about the future. I just think
that's great that you're optimistic. What do you think about the way, really, since Trump, the media has been like trying to divide people along racial lines, along gender lines, along?
I wouldn't blame it on the media. I would put it more in Trump's. I mean, here's how the secret societies run the world. Okay, it's a leviathan of 3 levels, and each level has 3 parts. The top level is mining metal and money. Okay, you own that. If you can affect that, you're in big trouble. The next is a very active level. They use war a lot, and that's drugs, guns, and oil. Okay, and then where this meets the road is media, movies / music, because you got to control that, or it'll bite you in the bunny. And then quote unquote magic, their ability to do mass trauma.
Like September 11th. Can you
and the JFK assassination.
Can you give us a rundown on September 11th, and somebody who might be hearing this for the first time, can you talk about how there was a false flag?
Well, I can give you a rundown, but if you want to know anything, you got to read books. Okay, you got to read books, and I'm going to recommend Daniel Hopsicker's Welcome to Terrorland. First off, all a patsy ever does is take a picture and put a frame around it. Okay, that's a patsy's job, and that's all he gets to do. In an intelligence operation, you never allow a patsy to have any influence on the operation.
What's the most shocking thing?
9/11, they were remote controlled. The planes were remote controlled.
And what's the most shocking thing overall that you've come across in your research, half a century?
The use of the FBI to run muscle for pedophiles.
Wow. Can you give us a little bit of info on that? We're reading in the news now about the Epstein pedophile case, and they're scrubbing for the media all those connections with politicians.
Franklin scandal.
What's that?
It's a book by our author Nick Bryant. That is the best look at the Franklin scandal, a very journalistic look at it.
What is the Franklin scandal?
The Franklin scandal was a national interstate pedophile ring, very similar to Epstein's.
When I first encountered, for example, the ideas of David Icke, it seemed like it's so far out, but the more I learn and the more I read, the more I realize, oh, David Icke really does know what he's talking about. He talks about like the Queen of England eating flesh and stuff. I don't know if there's any evidence for that, the cannibalism and the secret societies.
Well, that's probably a bit cryptical, but I mean, definitely the Queen of England is part of a secret society. I mean, why do the blue bloods think they're blue? Why do you think the blue bloods think they're blue? Give me an answer. You must have some answer.
Okay. They think that, I don't know. I heard that it was something to do with like during the plague, they would drink out of silver goblets and the silver offers them immunity and it was called blue blood. I don't
know. No. The blue bloods think they're blue because they believe that they're related to King David.
Okay. What's on the agenda for Trine Day Press in the future? Any good books coming up?
Oh, we've got some amazing books coming out. I've got one called School World Order.
School World Order.
That's very, very scary. It works on top of America's Secret Establishment by Sutton, Charlotte Iserbyt's Dumbing Down America. And see, Charlotte, her father and her grandfather were in Skull and Bones, and she's the person who gave Anthony Sutton the membership list of Skull and Bones that started his research into Skull and Bones. And so it's a very good book. We've got a book coming out from a monarch sex slave that is quite interesting.
Project Monarch?
Yes.
What was Project Monarch?
Project Monarch was part of one of the mind control programs.
Oh, like MK Ultra when they were trying to make remote control assassins, people.
Yes, and learn about it. And
here in South America, scopolamine is just a flower that people have in the gardens, but criminals will take scopolamine and process it and push you into a hypnotic state where they can tell you to do something, you do it, you won't even remember. And that's the sort of thing the CIA was experimenting with in the 60s. Some of that came to light, but a lot of these school shootings and these mass trauma events, these mass shootings, you start looking at the perpetrators and you see their connections to these mind control programs, and it's pretty scary.
Yeah, there does appear to be an agenda. But one thing I want folks to remember too is, you know who Colonel Tom Parker is?
Remind us.
Colonel Tom Parker, he was Elvis's manager. Okay. And Colonel Tom found out, and he was prepared the second time, but he found out he only had to pay the girls once. Do you understand?
I'm not sure I do.
Okay, well, to make to get Elvis off, the first time they did it, they had girls there screaming. Okay, those girls were paid to scream. Okay, and the second time, Colonel Tom was prepared to pay girls to scream, but he didn't have to
because they copycat.
Right, they became part of the zeitgeist or whatever. So
that could be like with the mass shootings. You get these copycat killers. So the first one might have been a mind control, but then people want to outdo it.
Right. And it's similar to the people that are harassed by microwave. Mm-hmm. Okay. um, they're very, very interesting people. Okay. And one thing I found, I mean, I've worked with one lady who was a lawyer, and she was uncovering a drug run that was happening through a military. Um, and so,
In Oregon?
yeah, it was in Oregon. And she, and they started harassing her with the microwave. And it's very insidious, because all you really have to do is you know, kind of brush them on the cheek once, and then, you know, they think that every other thing that even comes close to them is part of that, you know. So you
Well,
know,
you're in Oregon. I don't know if you ever met the late Michael Rupert, but he was.
oh, Rupert, I knew Rupert very, very well. I've had Rupert at my house. Rupert went through mind control training, okay, as a child. Okay, I mean, how come Michael Rupert all of a sudden, you know, we started getting crowds about CIA drugs, and then all of a sudden he says, you know, and then he got, you know, he went to 9/11, and then he took the whole 9/11 crowd and took them into peak oil, which is just crap. Okay, no, Michael, I'm very familiar with Michael. I spent hours with Michael. I know Michael very well.
Well, yeah, he said that he, as a LA detective, he uncovered evidence of government drug dealing. He worked for decades
Well.
trying to get that out to the public.
I think he got put into a position. He got put into a position, because I watched it several times. I watched another spook that I know try and set up a quote unquote fight with Rupert over the internet to give them both some gravitas. Okay, and it's a wild world out there.
How do you see the 2020 elections holding out? Like I mentioned before, how the media is just trying to divide people over ideology, gender, everything else, and Trump's kind of rising.
Trump's dividing. Trump's using the divide card. I mean, I wouldn't put it on the media thing, unless you want to look at Fox. I mean, they're the most propagandic.
Sure.
And are using the most lies to push their story.
Well, one more thing.
But what I you know, I mean, it depends. If the turnout is so much that they can't steal it enough, you know.
That was what I was going to mention next. Stolen elections. I think we have this idea that we're somehow immune, but have you done any research about?
Well, look in 2000, they stole it in front of our faces.
Sure, yeah.
I mean, they said, here, this guy won. Oh, well, no, wait a minute, he didn't. And they put in the idiot's son. Okay, I mean, how much does it take to realize? And there's quite a few books out there about it.
Well,
Daniel Hopsicker did a great video about it. And it has to do with the machines. And I mean, the whole way that, you know, the number of electorates that we should have a lot more people in Washington, D.C. Right now, the number that's capped in Washington, D.C., they have it capped because of the size of the damn building. Okay? That building was built in 1800, and that's stupid. Okay? And if you had a lot more people there, they couldn't be as controlled as the people are there. Okay.
Now, you probably get strange reactions when you talk about this stuff, but do you feel the new generation now is maybe more open or less open than your generation?
I got a friend of mine I went to elementary school with, and he looked at me one day and he says, you know, I don't believe what you say, but, you know, my kids believe everything you say. So, you know, but again, I caution people very, very, because there's so many agendas out there that are looking to hook you with one conspiracy theory or another. And then once you start looking in conspiracy theory, you know, like I say, a lot of people try and do the old conspiracy theory tango. Well, if you believe this, then take you onto this, you know.
Well, once your eyes are open and once you realize that everything the media has been saying all these years is just garbage, you kind of start to question everything. And it's like, okay, the governments are liars, so why are you going to believe them about anything? They say they say they went to the moon. Okay, well, are you going to give them the burden of proof when you know they're liars? So you kind of stop believing in everything because
and that's part of their shtick. That's part of their shtick. I mean, you read like the letter that Washington wrote back to the guy who said talked about the Illuminati, and Washington said, yeah, their tenets are here, and what they want to do is divorce us from our foundations. They want to get you away from your faith, your family, and your government, because we need government, okay? And government's a thing just like anything, and it's what people do with it, okay? And so they've created a lot of people getting very cynical, so people don't even go out to vote. I mean, more people not voted last time than voted, okay? So it's a myself, I see that these secret societies, one of the first things they did was take hold of education, okay, and they pulled it back. You look at the 8th grade tests that people took in the 1800s, most college people couldn't pass them today, and they taught you civics. They taught you how to be a citizen, how to work, how to make a government work. And that was one of the first things the secret societies did, was put us into a Prussian education system. And and then they bought out all the media and took it over, and they got the people in power, to get rid of the fairness doctrine. I mean, when I was a kid, if somebody said something really outrageous on TV, it could be anybody in the community, got the right to go on TV and counter what that person said, And I mean, and these airwaves are owned by they're public airwaves, So I mean, we've been dumbed down to a great degree, and have allowed this to happen because you go to any school board meeting, you go to any city council meeting, how many members of the public you have there?
Not too many, yeah.
Right.
Well, I was actually homeschooled, and so I escaped a lot of the indoctrinating, and maybe that's why I can see things more clearly now, because I didn't have to go through all that conditioning. And when I got out of it at the time, I thought I kind of got a bum rap, but now that I've gone back and I've studied a lot of this stuff, I realized it was a blessing not to be indoctrinated, especially now since they're teaching transgenderism in the schools. And I can't imagine sending children to public schools these days, because it's just so over the top.
Yeah. Yep. Okay.
Well, thank you.
Thank you.
Have a wonderful day.
You too. Bye-bye.